about Operation Uphold Democracy. House Speaker Tom Foley and Republican Whip Newt Gingrich discussed that issue today.
The Clinton administration is now on the edge of a disaster. You may have seen the footage from yesterday of Haitian policemen standing there armed, watching looters steal everything out of a store. Resembled the riots in Los Angeles. I mean, you can't say to the police on the one hand, don't stop looters, and then be shocked when there are looters. And we are inviting a level of anarchy in Haiti.
I think the troops should be given an opportunity to settle into the mission. I don't believe we ought to set a preemptory date for their withdrawal.
U.S. troops have already confiscated weapons from a naval base outside Port-au-Prince. Colorado Governor Roy Romer is in the...
It's really going to be aimed at, again, working with the Haitians to do that, to ensure that they are pursuing a much more aggressive policy about disarming. We think that's important to do.
How many troops are eventually going to wind up in Haiti, Mr. Panetta? At this point, we have 20,000 there. I think that's about 5,000 more than most people thought in the beginning. Is this it? Is there a ceiling now, or can we expect more American troops to be going down there?
I think you're looking at pretty much the planned number of troops that we had anticipated. We thought we were looking at about 18,000. We're now above 20,000. I think that's pretty much it, Bob. Our hope now is to basically continue to gain control of the country. We've made tremendous progress. The men and women of our military units are doing an outstanding job. We've been able to have the parliament reopen. Generally, of course, we've had some scattered instances of violence, but overall, the situation in Haiti is much calmer, so that we are making good progress there. I think the hope is that we now want to make the transition to the peacekeeping force of the UN and begin to draw down on U.S. forces. Our hope is that we can begin that soon, but right now the first mission is to try to stabilize the country.
Wait a minute. You said you're ready now to start drawing down the forces. When?
No, we're at a situation where we're continuing to stabilize the effort there in Haiti. We're now, as you've said, somewhere over 20,000. We think that is sufficient right now to be able to maintain the mission that we're on. And then our goal is obviously to begin eventually to draw down and to begin to have the UN peacekeeping forces take over. That has always been the goal from the very beginning. As the President has indicated, that hopefully will be a matter of months.
All right, Rita.
You know, you've talked about trying to establish stability there. One of the continuing problems seems to be the presence of General Cedras and his cohorts, the other military dictators. Yet we are now hearing that President Carter says and that General Cedras says that the issue of their leaving never even came up during the negotiations. Did the White House fail to give Jimmy Carter instructions to try to get General Cedras to leave, even at the same time that you were saying here, that's going to be part of the package, we're going to try to get that to happen?
Again, I think from the very beginning, the President made very clear to the delegation that went down there, led by President Carter, former President Carter, that we wanted these leaders to step down, and that we believed that in stepping down, they would also leave the country. And that message was made very clear to the delegation. Obviously, that continues to be an issue that's being discussed, but we think that ultimately, the reality is that these leaders will not only step down, but ultimately leave the country as well. I think that's the reality of the situation we're dealing with, and that's the direction we hope to move in.
I'm just trying to get it clear, though. Was the fact that this never came up something that Jimmy Carter just didn't follow through, or did you never give a specific instruction to him that the President wanted it to be impressed upon General Cedras that you expected him to leave? Because everyone says it was never taken up.
Well, as you know, we weren't directly involved in the delegation's deliberations there in Haiti, so I'm not sure what did or did not come up, but I can assure you that the message was pretty clear that we wanted these leaders to step down and that the reality was that they would have to leave the country.
Is there any sort of contingency plan if they don't step down?
Well, obviously, right now we're looking at a situation where I think the leaders themselves have indicated not only to the delegation, but to the congressional delegation that went down there, that they do intend to step down, and that will be done peacefully. That, I think, is one of the major accomplishments here, is that we're getting these leaders to step down without the necessity of a military invasion. And October 15th is the date, and on October 15th, we expect them to step down.
Let's turn a little bit to politics and the...
Thing had changed. We read the the document that was signed in Haiti by former President Carter and Mr. Jean Bertrand, the so-called acting president in the country, and whether or not anything had changed that would cause him to do anything different than paragraph 3, I think, of that resolution calls for, and that is for him to step down. He said absolutely not. His plans are to step down.
But besides just saying that, what about the other two also? Do you expect them to leave as well? Will conditions be such that they in any way would even consider staying, do you think?
I don't think so. I don't see it at all. General Biambi was sitting next to him. Certainly no indication there that he was going to do anything differently. I've been told that, that Colonel Francois, the head of the police, has already bought a home, about $250,000 on his police salary, and moved his family already out of the country. He's apparently still there. But every indication is that not only are they going to step down, and clear indications of that, but I would agree with Leon Panetta. There's no way these people, in my view, can stay in the country. They're not saying that now. Yesterday, General Cedras did not say that. I wouldn't have expected him to. He was not alone in the room. He had his entire high command with him. The idea that he would have said, I'm leaving the country as well, probably would have been demoralizing to some of these people who will be staying. And hopefully, some of them apparently are competent people who have good records and can help rebuild Haitian armed forces. So we didn't ask him that question directly for the obvious reason. We didn't expect an honest answer at that point.
And while you were there, did you get a sense of what role the U.S. military will take in disarming these sort of paramilitary troops, the attachés, as they're called?
First of all, I want to tell you how impressed I am with General Shelton and his forces. They're just doing a magnificent job. I mean, these kids down there are just, the reception they've received from the Haitian people. I lived in that country, or on the border of that country, for 2.5 years, know it fairly well, and I don't know anything like it. It's just remarkable how well they're being received. And the remaining problem here are these paramilitary groups, and it's a good name for them, paramilitary. They picked up one fellow the other day, and he had identifications that showed him as being a member of the armed forces, a member of the attachés, and a member of this so-called FRAP, this paramilitary group, all three. And it's not uncommon that members of these paramilitary groups are also members of the military. Our forces there are going to take steps in the coming days here to disarm this crowd, and they'd like to do it working with the Haitian armed forces, because they want to work with some of these responsible elements in the military, if they can. But I would tell you as well that if that doesn't work out, they're going to disarm them one way or the other. They're not going to allow the situation to persist that we saw earlier this week with these people firing into crowds indiscriminately, or even a bit yesterday. They see that as a major obstacle to achieving a stable environment in which President Aristide can come back. So steps will be taken.
And once they lose their arms, do you think they will then get with the program, so to speak, and agree that President Aristide really is the leader?
Well, I don't know whether they'll agree with it or not, but President Aristide...
Down, seizing weapons to prevent sporadic violence. The military has confiscated weapons at the small Haitian Navy headquarters southwest of the capital. We have two reports, one from the White House and another from Port-au-Prince. And we begin with CNN's Richard Blystone in Port-au-Prince with the very latest. Richard?
Hello, Kathy. Well, so far, the U.S. soldiers here have been rounding out their second week here in Haiti with a quiet day after 3 days of disorders and 3 days of the tricky problem of trying to assert their authority in a violent country without using violence themselves.
U.S. patrols in Port-au-Prince Sunday trying to put over the message that America can and will protect the innocent and crack down on the violent without taking sides. Under orders to disarm paramilitary units, soldiers visited 7 locations Saturday, but at most of them came up with little. At a naval base outside Port-au-Prince, they took over without a fight and grabbed 24 machine guns and 160 rifles. The U.S. Navy took aboard food for school children in northern Haiti and vehicles to deliver it before schools open 10 days from now. Sunday Mass at Port-au-Prince Cathedral, and a quiet morning for a change after 3 straight days of scattered violence. A warehouse owner and his hired guards, who took their own action Saturday and left 9 people with birdshot wounds when a rock-throwing mob tried to storm their compound, complained U.S. MPs were only protecting looters. But the MPs stayed on to keep the crowd away and left the guards with their weapons.
But what some people would see as a balance, others will see as a contradiction or as conflicting signals. To sort that out, a few more days of quiet here wouldn't hurt. Kathy?
Richard, what about outside Port-au-Prince, the capital city, in the countryside, for example? Has there been any violence reported in those areas?
Not a great deal, Kathy. In fact, in many of the places in the countryside, it's going along very well. The U.S. Arms Collection Program, we're told, has taken in 1,000 weapons up in Cap Haitien in the north of the country. Most of the problem here has not really been all through Port-au-Prince. It's been confined to a few neighborhoods downtown in Port-au-Prince. So as long as those can be kept under control, there is hope that the whole operation can go along.
Richard, thank you. Richard Blystone reporting live from Port-au-Prince. The White House is getting pressure from both sides on the Haiti issue. Some people are pushing for an increased role for the U.S. troops. Others want a firm withdrawal date. CNN's Carl Rochelle has a live report from the White House. Carl?
Kathy, news this morning also that the first U.S. troops may be coming home from Haiti very soon. Deputy Secretary of Defense John Deutsch says things are going so well in Haiti that the Pentagon plans to announce on Monday that the U.S. Marines who had been put in the area at Cape Haitien will be coming out, some of the first ones should begin coming out as early as tomorrow. They will be replaced by U.S. Army troops from the 10th Mountain Division. The pullout by Marines is not unexpected. CNN reported on Friday that the Pentagon did not plan to keep the Marines in Haiti much longer. But their pullout means that that role will be picked up by U.S. Army forces patrolling the streets of Haiti. They are coming under increasing pressure to deal with the violence.
Our forces there are going to take steps in the coming days here to disarm this crowd. And they'd like to do it working with the Haitian armed forces because they want to work with some of these responsible elements in the military if they can. But I would tell you as well that if that doesn't work out, they're going to disarm them one way or the other. They're not going to allow the situation to persist that we saw earlier this week with these people firing into crowds indiscriminately.
As pressure for U.S. troops to do more increases, so do warnings from some members of Congress.
The Clinton administration is now on the edge of a disaster. You may have seen the footage from yesterday of Haitian policemen standing there armed, watching looters steal everything out of a store. Resembled the riots in Los Angeles. I mean, you can't say to the police on the one hand, don't stop looters, and then be shocked when there are looters. And we are inviting a level of anarchy in Haiti, which if we disarm the police and we take away all of their ability to stop violence, is going to require the United States to police a country of 7 million people with American young men and women on the front line dealing with a third world population that doesn't speak English. I think we are right now drifting steadily into a quicksand of misery.
The Clinton administration is trying to put the best face on its efforts in Haiti, pointing out some things like the parliament back in session and the fact that electric power is back on in Port-au-Prince. But privately, they are concerned that the growing efforts to bring the violence to an end may push U.S. forces into a more police-like mission. That's known as mission creep, expanding the role of the U.S. military, and it's something that officials here have said they will continue to
Firing
resist.
at unarmed Haitians. Wounds were from birdshot. Where does excessive start? The owner claims the crowd had attacked his warehouse compound because they believed the U.S. had disarmed his guards.
Since they've been here, they've been looting all over the place. And everybody's been standing by and laughing.
Property owners complain the soldiers are only protecting looters. Trouble is, it seems other Haitians have come to believe that too.
Raiding the paramilitaries for arms is one thing, but the big challenge is one of persuasion. Persuading people with guns to give them up, persuading the mobs that they could touch off something that would jeopardize everything they say they want. Richard Blystone, CNN, Port-au-Prince.
The murder of a 7-year-old boy leads CBS Evening News' new
task. NBC's Jim Maceda is in Port-au-Prince this evening. Good evening, Jim.
Good evening, and U.S. troops appeared more aggressive in the streets of Haiti's capital today, where it seems a new phase of weapons seizures has begun. Well, that's made a few GIs happier, but many still wonder how they can possibly keep the peace in such a violent climate. Violence is so routine in the streets of Port-au-Prince, shoppers hardly took notice today of 2 fresh corpses in the slum of Cité Soleil. The rumor was they stole something. No one was asking questions.
Haitian killing people. Killing you today, tomorrow say you steal.
U.S. Army medics had their hands full again. In the same fiercely pro-Aristide slum, this man was beaten by a gang. Maybe right-wing and pro-Army, or maybe just criminal.
We're experiencing it more and more every day. We're finding beaten people, their friends carry them up to us, drop them off at our feet in front of our vehicles, et cetera, et cetera.
U.S. troops are confronting, many for the first time, a culture of violence. One which, by the very presence of the U.S. military, is intensifying, though no one can say by how much. Victims are mounting on both sides. And no one feels more worried than the small minority of affluent Haitians.
The masses, they feel that they've been oppressed for 3 years, and with the presence of the U.S. military now, they cannot be touched.
The result, Haitians loot with impunity, and property owners defend themselves. Yesterday, 7 Haitians were wounded when armed guards opened fire before any looting outside a warehouse. Francis, a meat processor, lives and works behind 14-foot-high electrified walls and keeps a 24-hour armed guard. He doesn't condone the recent violence, but says he will use it too to protect himself from the poor just beyond his walls.
We have made it specifically clear to our environment in here. If anything happens to us in here, I will burn this entire section here. I go, they go.
And he predicts outright civil war if U.S. troops don't get actively involved in keeping the peace. This evening, U.S. soldiers were seen raiding a store, they said for weapons, but turned up only 1 air rifle, not likely to make a difference. Still, there was success today. About 1,000 weapons were seized at a border crossing, and dozens of automatic weapons were taken at a small naval base used as a paramilitary training center. Ann?
Jim, does this mean the U.S. troops will finally start disarming these paramilitary units, these so-called attachés who've been killing unarmed civilians?
And they're not going to start yet. I think they're going to give the Haitian police about 3 or 4 more days, perhaps a week at most, to show that they can do it. If they prove that they're not moving at all, which they have not done yet, then the U.S. forces are going to move in. I think by the end of the week, we'll see the FRAP Center, the major right-wing center, taken over by U.S. troops.
All right, Jim Maceda in Haiti. Thank you so much, Jim. A major lead today.